Welcome back to the Combat Patrol Terminator Captain painting videos. In this one, we're going to be painting brass and gold. Here's our miniature from last time. We finished off our silver and steel. So now we're going to do the other type of metallic, the yellow metallics. Start by separating them out. Okay. There's actually a couple of bits on the base we need to worry about this one. These spent casings. Right, no further ado, we're going to need two base paints. We're going to need Rune Lord Brass and Retributor Armour, two layer paints, Stormhose Silver and Liberator Gold, contrast of Dark Oath Flesh, and Army Speedpaint Dark Wood. As usual with all of the GW range of metallics, we're going to use Lamium Medium as the thinning medium. So for this one, find some good reference photos of the heavy metal team, or the box art, or the Combat Patrol magazine will have some of these pictures in it as well. Use that to find out where all the brass and gold will be on the miniature. I'm going to go a little bit more fast and loose with my colour scheme, but if you think it should be gold, paint it gold, and if you think it should be brass, paint it brass. So we're going to start with Retributor Armour. I put the paint in the palette. I'm going to have a little drop of Lamium Medium off to one side to thin the paint as I need to go. Retributor Armour is quite runny to start with. You can see it's moving around quite nicely on my brush. And then thumbnail test, it's all good, good coverage, good flow. But it will dry out in that palette, and that's what that Lamium Medium's there for, just as a dip into. Now I'm just going to, right, so when I say gold, what I mean by that are all the decorative elements, not the functional elements, which will be painted brass. So there's a bit of a mix-up in the colour naming terms, because what you would traditionally think of as gold-coloured for our miniatures would normally be brass. So you wouldn't gold plate everything. Well, it is the 41st millennium, maybe they just have gold coming out of their ears. It's actually quite a rare metal, so you wouldn't coat everything in it. You would coat it in brass or coppers instead. And it polishes up really nicely, gives it that luster. I think that's what people think gold looks like. In actual fact, it's quite a dull metal, especially day to day, and it burnishes up very fast. So what we're actually doing is painting this to make it look like brass, but we'll call it gold. It shouldn't take too long because there aren't many elements of it. It's definitely going to be a two coats job. Just because you don't see me do it doesn't mean I haven't done it. Once it's thoroughly dried, that's our base coat complete for the gold. Well, now we're going to move on to the brass base coat. For that, we're going to use Rune Lord Brass, and you can see by comparison to the Retributor Armour, it's a duller, but it's still a yellow metallic. We've still got a little pool of Lamium Medium, just in case we need to thin it down at all. Can be reference to miniature, any areas that would have a dirty brass. As I said in the gold part, what we think of gold is actually polished brass. Well, unpolished brass is this really dull yellow colour. And we're going to, so you wouldn't polish the rounds in a bolt gun. Maybe the Space Marines would canonically, but it doesn't look right. So we're going to paint them the dull colour. So yeah, separate him out from his base. We won't need that part for this. And pick out all these spent bolter casings. Try to be neat, because we're going to use contrast on this base. A nice quick and easy job. Oh, that is actually a bit of... I thought that was a bit of shell casing. That's actually a piece of rebar. It'll look close enough there. So, little mistake. Hopefully no one will notice. Yep. 3 bolter casings. And the only other element that I could see were the rounds in the bolter magazine that are visible. We've already painted the silver either side of it, so we need to go in quite carefully, and we're just going to paint in each round. We're not going to overwhelm it. We'll go into the joins between the rounds. Just nice and gentle in there. We'll still shade it though. If you're applying this technique to other Space Marines, there'll be more of these sort of brass areas or exposed cables on Chaos Space Marines. This will look really good for that as well. Well, get all these parts thoroughly dry and be ready to shade them. Our base colours, nice and thoroughly dry. Let's give them a quick shade. We're going to shade them all with the same colour, which is dark oak flesh, thinned down about 50-50 with Lamium medium. This is going to convert our contrast paints into shades. All of the brass and gold areas. And we do need to be careful at this stage because we've painted around most of the other areas. It's quite a subtle effect. Not putting too much shade on, more staining it, filtering it. That's the shading complete. Instead of the dark oak flesh and Lamium medium, which I prefer to use, you can of course use Reikland Flesh Shade or any of the other flesh washes made by Army Painter, Vallejo, or Two Thin Coats, for example. We're all going to get the same sort of effect up. And the next stage, we'll do it a little bit. We're going to do a pin wash. With the flesh shade dried, we're going to do our pin wash. We're going to take a tiniest amount of speed paint. So literally, I haven't even dropped it on. I just literally, whatever was coming out the nozzle when I opened the lid, that's more than sufficient. And I'm going to heavily thin it with water. For whatever reason, speed paint is very different to contrast. And I've now made an efficient pin wash, which I only normally get out of enamel paint. If you just take a look at that, you can sort of see how it's behaving differently. This only happens if you mix it with water, so don't mix it with Lamium medium, speed paint medium, or anything else. Water will do the trick. Back to the Mini. What I'm going to do is use this just to try and flood paint into the recesses only. I don't want it on any other part of the gold. That's flowing in there nicely. Not put too much on my brush. Take your time on this one. And another thing I love about speed paint is if you make a mistake, you can just wipe it away. It shouldn't take too long, even being careful. These rivets here are quite prominent, so I'm just going to touch them and it should just flood all the way around. Just give it a little bit of encouragement if it needs it. And if you put too much on, just use it as a reservoir for the other rivets. Don't forget the rounds in the magazine. And sword is an interesting one because it's got these feathers on the wings. They all need a bit of extra depth on them. That's cross-guard too. That's our pin wash done. the next stage, there's only 2 stages left, and they're both highlights. And our pin wash is dry, and we can see that nice deep recess shading around the rivets and the rounds in the magazine. So now what we're going to try and do is do a nice edge highlight on all of those gold surfaces, and for that I'll be using Liberator Gold. It's a very difficult, it's a colour that separates easily in the pot in storage, so do make sure you do the back of the thumbnail test. Switch to a slightly smaller brush now, making sure it's flowing nicely. Again, have that little reservoir of Lamium medium just off to one side to thin it as you go. Oh yeah, I'm just going to try and catch all the edges of the gold plate with this. That's our Liberator Gold highlight done. For the brass in the magazine and on the base, I'm just going to go straight to Stormhost Silver. Quite bright. It looks nice on the sort of dull yellow. It really catches a bit of a glint. So a tiny little amount there. And then these spent cases here as well. Yeah. So a tiny little line. And that's our highlighting complete. Quickly throw them back together. And that's our gold and brass painted. I think you'll agree, he's coming along nicely now. There's a couple more steps we need to do. And I think for the next one, let's do his head. Let's do his head and his face. Okay, well, see you on the next one.